Hi YouTube. Today we're going to check out a small tutorial on how to get the nuclear uranium process started, get the Kovarex process started, and turn that into nuclear fuel for your nuclear power plant. And this is the early portion of the nuclear fuel part. So if you're having trouble getting started, then this is the video for you. Thank you very much for your support. If you like this sort of video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe, ring that bell. All my links and support links are all in the description below. If you have a question or a comment, please leave it in the comment section below, or you can come ask me live. I'm usually live on twitch.tv/clowntown. You can jump into the chat, ask me questions about the game, on nuclear or anything else that's on your mind. So with that, let's get to the video. All right, so the first thing that we'll look at is how to mine up the uranium ore. And right now you can see I'm over a large uranium deposit, and I've put miners all over. But one of the things that is really important about this is that you can't just throw a miner down on uranium. You actually do have to power up the miner with some sulfuric acid. So I'm using creative mod here. So I've materialized in some sulfuric through this pipe. What you'll want to do is you'll want to make your own sulfuric acid and pump it in either through train or through a small sulfuric process. You could probably do that if you had oil around, like right here. Oil plus some iron, and you can get to some sulfuric and power all this up. You could probably do that pretty easily. So. But what I've done here is I've just put in some sulfuric, and you can see the miner each miner contains about 200 sulfuric, and you need to pipe it from say a main header. What's nice about this is that the miners act as their own piping. So if you just put a miner next to each other, you can see the little blue arrows on the side, which means it acts as a pipeline and transfers pipe between the miners. What you can also do is you can put pipes in between mining rows, assuming they're not blocked by a power pole or something like that. But you can put these miners and transfer mining between each row. And what I've done is I've gone ahead and made a sulfuric for each row. But I could theoretically I could eliminate one of these and then join them back to back and have join them at several spots back to back and have one row transmit to the other row from the back of the miner as shown here. So there you go. But in order to get the uranium up off the ground, you need miner and sulfuric. It's one of the more advanced mining operations that you'll need to do in Factorio. And all I've done is I've just kind of thrown it around into a fairly balanced 4-4 belt balancer. I'm using blue belts, and now we're going to put it into this process. The first one you'll need is this uranium process recipe. So this uranium ore will go into these centrifuges. These centrifuges, don't sleep on these. They're very expensive to make. It does take a little bit. You'll see this. I'm using creative mod so I can materialize these. But in your vanilla game, 50 steel, 100 red boards, 100 gears, and here's the sleeper is 100 concrete. You will need a little bit of concrete to make these. These are very expensive compared to the other, and most of the other assemblies that you make. I think one of the only ones that's more expensive than this is probably the reactor, right? 500 of each of those. So anyway, that's what we're going to be producing here. But out of that is, look at the recipe. The output is 10 ore in, 12-second crafting time. And here's the kicker, is you have a 99% chance of putting out one uranium-238 and a 0.7% chance of putting out a U-235. Now, the 235 is really what you want. 235 is used in your uranium fuel, your fuel cells. That's really the sweet stuff. So the 235 is really what you're after. You're going to have a ton of this 238 left over. So what I've gone ahead and done is I've put this ore through a little beaconed arrangement so that it's a little bit faster. And you can put productivity modules in here, so you get about, you do get, 20% more of each of those, an extra churn every cycle. So, and I've gone ahead and put all kinds of beacons around it, 14 different sources or 12 different sources around it, so that it goes to a 570 crafting speed. And this is very power intensive. So you need to make sure your power plant, your other power plants, is very, very sturdy before starting these, because presumably the reason why you're doing nuclear is to get some nuclear power is the #1 benefit. So you kind of need a little bit of starting power, either through solar or solid fueled steam, that sort of thing, to kind of bridge yourself into nuclear. And even if you don't have any beacons around it, it's still pretty power intensive. It's 362 kilowatts with nothing affecting it from the outside. And so all I'm really doing is I'm outputting it to these undergrounds, and then we're going to collect it here. And I've made 2 collectors. All of these will filter down, and the 235 will filter into this one chest. And we'll do some stuff with that here in a minute. But everything else, which will be the 238, the darker green, will filter into here and just be stored and just effectively be stored. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start this, and then we'll let this run for a little bit. And there we go. You'll see these start to output, and very few of these will be filtered over to 235. Most of these will be 238 as they output. Once they catch up, and this will get a lot more sparse, and all of these will kick on. You'll see them running, inputting and outputting. The stacker inserters do such a great job of pushing the material out. See little bitty dots of 235 coming in, and we're capturing them now. So all right. So let's fast forward the video so we can see the next stage of evolution in this build. Hey guys, I had this recorded already on the same day that I recorded the other one. But then I thought about it, and I figured out a better way to do it. So you'll notice I've changed shirts, but it's because it's a different day where I figured it all out. Anyway, little YouTube editing tricks. I didn't feel like changing shirts back into the one I had on. Don't want to go get that out of the laundry. But here, I wanted to show you. This is the start of the process to get the Kovarex process primed. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go grab some that I have produced just a little bit. Now again, let's look at this in recipe in detail. This is the Kovarex process. You'll need to unlock this with the Kovarex Enrichment Process. It's very expensive, 1,500 of each of red, green, blue, and purple science, and 30 seconds a piece. But it is worth it, because it'll unlock turning all of this dark green 238 into the stuff that you need, the 235, the light area. So I'm going to show you how to get this process started first. Let's look at the individual recipe. So what you need is 40 of these 235s in, and then 5 of the 238s in. So it's going to consume 5 of the dark green, output 2. So it's going to consume 3 of them every time. And essentially, it's going to spit out 1 of the 235. So you're essentially turning 3 dark green into 1 light green. And it takes 60 seconds. And it also takes 40 of them to get your first one started. And then, of course, you can do some more. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to take this away so I can 2, 3, 4, 5. I can go ahead and make and count these and count the ones I put in. So I've got 40, and I need 40 in. I'm going to get 41 out. All right. So here we go. So this one, I've already put just an abundance of the 238 in. It's got 12 in here. It's ready to go. But what I need is the first 40 that you get out of the ore mining process, or so I guess it's called the uranium processing, where you turn ore into, have a chance of getting dark green or light green. To get it all started, you need 40 of the light green. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and turn it on. And it'll load it all in using stacker inserters. As soon as it gets 40, the process will start, and it's going to consume 3 dark green and output 41. It's going to produce 1 more of the light green, and all I've got a little circular process here so it can feed it back in. And over time, I'm going to have 1 extra every cycle. 1 extra, 2 extra, 3 extra, etc. Right? And this is just going to cycle up. So I would recommend doing this with steel chests first, because I'm going to show you here in a minute a belt build that cleaves off the top, that gets the process started, but then cleans some excess off the top. On bot builds, that's a little more complicated, because what you want to do is you'll eventually turn this light green, this good 235, into things like fuel or uranium fuel for your trains or in vehicles, or you'll turn it into fuel cells to power up your nuclear reactors, which is where the big benefit comes in. But this is really what you want. You want a lot of this 235. But what you don't want to do is pull it out of this process early to go all towards fuel when you don't have as much of this to keep this engine going. So you need a level of 235 to keep this going the entire time. And all you want to do is skim off the top once your process is maxed out. Right? So you need a level of this in the process at all times. You could totally do this and set up many of these. What I've done is, you can do this without beacons and without these modules in here. It is better always to beacon these up and get it faster if you have the power initially to get it going. So I'm just going to, I may pause it here, but look at there. I've got 12 extra that I didn't have. I've just been consuming the dark green, and looks like I've consumed 36 dark green, and I've turned it into 12 light green. All right, so this will eventually burn down, and I'll have a few extra here. So now the next process is, how do I scale this up? And first one I'm going to show you how to do is belts. Once I have a few of these, I can shove these into the next process. Maybe you get a stack of 100, and we'll put them into the next process. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so coming out of this process, you'll see that I've got just a ridiculous amount of storage for the 238. You will end up needing a lot of it, because you have to produce a lot of 238 to get your first 235. But once you have a Kovarex process running, then you'll be able to start consuming some of that 238 and turning it into the good 235 that you need. So, all right. So here's an assembly I've built, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this out here. So what I've got is a process that will move along these belts, and I'll get rid of the beacons just so we can see it a little bit better. And last bit. All right. So what I'm going to do is, as I load in this 235 onto this belt, I'm going to use a little bit of belt trickery here. You can have this blueprint. It's in the description below. But what I'm essentially going to do is I'm going to try and filter out all of the 235 along the bottom and 238 on the top. And what I'm going to try and do is always have some 238 on the inside belt closest to the machine. Same with 235. I'm going to always try and have some on the 235 on the inside of the belt, so that when I output, when this machine is done, it has a space on the opposite side of the belt to output. I never want to block this from outputting, because then if I'm blocking it from outputting, it's not running and making me more 235. So I got a little system that I set up, and that's what all this business is down here. And so as I put my things in here, let me just go grab a little bit of 238 first. So as I do this, I'm going to go ahead and put in 40, and it's going to go ahead and start. This is what it looks like unbeaconed. And so if you follow the logic, it's going to output the 235 here, and then it's going to try and grab them if it doesn't have any more already. Otherwise, it's going to go to the other side of the belt and be siphoned off or recycled. This one is going to try and output, and then it's going to give it a little space to try and pick it up, and it's going to try and restart itself again. Sometimes it'll miss, and there are times where you'll have one of them run. This one will pick up like 36 units, and you'll have to wait for 4 more. But once you have several of these, you can get it done. Especially if you've got your pilot one running, you can probably just cleave off a little bit of this and then throw it into the bigger process. So here it's gonna complete, and it's gonna output and try and feed itself to get started. And here we go. So look, it's gonna feed itself, and then it's gonna go again, right? So that's what we want to do for all of these. What you can do also is you can put some yellow belt in here and slow this process way down, so that the stacker inserter can be double sure to grab everything that it needs to. Won't make it past. I'll live a little bit dangerously. I'll put it on some blue belts and let it go that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this in. So this blueprint, I've got the 238 coming into here, and I've got this on the inside of the belt. Always, this is going to cleave off any excess 238 and move it in here, cycle it around, and filter it back up on the inside of the belt. So I always want the inside of the belt done, inside of the belt fed. Otherwise, I'm just going to be storing up in here. The other thing that we'll need to do is we'll want to put this into the fuel maker, which is what you want to cleave off of the top of this process. It needs 19 of these dark greens and 1 of the 235 to make a fuel canister. It's going to make 10 fuel cell canisters, which is very energy dense, and that's what you're going to feed to your nuclear power plant, right? So this is going to come. The 235 to pilot the process is going to come in. It's going to get fed by this first one. This first one's going to light up, and then it'll pass the second one and the third one and the fourth one, etc., until this whole thing is done. And then once it's done here, we're going to try and keep the 235 on the near side of this belt where possible. So all of these have room to have some available to ingest to keep running. But then any excess, meaning on the opposite side of the belt that's not grabbed, it's going to go here and cleave off. So on this belt, I'm going to have on the bottom side 238 dark green, and on the top side 235 light green. Here it's going to split off. So that means if it's gone here, it hasn't been picked up, it's going to cleave off the excess, and it's going to go ahead and try and output into a storage chest, and then right back onto the near side. And what I've got is, if we ever end up with excess in this chest here of over 100, I'm going to start outputting to make these fuel canisters, because remember, all I need is 1 for that fuel canister. All right, so let's start off the process. I'm going to add, I've gone in and I've added a little bit of 235 to this process. So I'm going to go ahead and start this in slowly. What you'll see is that this little bit will be picked up by this first one, and there it'll get it kicked off. There's a few of them in here. I've run it off air a few times, and we'll just watch it. So the first one will try and feed in on itself. Any excess go to the next one, and what'll end up happening? See, this is what happens is, a few of them ran over to this side. This 15 here. There's some made it past 38. Here's the 39th one, and I'm going to go ahead and add a 40th one. Assume it's going to trickle in. There you go. Going to pull in. It'll feed in on itself. So occasionally when you first get started, you'll have some misses like that. A few minutes later, when it outputs the next one will pick it up and get started. But eventually, you're going to end up with a series of Kovarex enrichment processes like this. So instead of feeding in on itself, it'll end up feeding the next one down and propagating quite a bit better. So what I'm going to do next, I think, is I'll show you what happens when all of them are full. And all I'm going to do is just make sure all these are running. I'm going to put in half so that these will just kind of kick off. New ones will be added in. You don't want to slug too many of these, because then the output will be blocked. This inserter right here will be the limiter if you put too many in. So what we're going to do is just make make sure that these can kind of all run. I'll go ahead and add one more in there. Just make sure they're all running. Speed up time for the video. At some point, once these run and they have some in their intake consistently, then what'll end up happening is they'll be approaching 40 or so in their intake. Then you'll end up this insert, or this one here, will back up on the inside. You see there's one there right next to my mouse. What we want is they always want to be on the inside, so these always have fuel, but you never want to block the outside. And what this underground does is it cleaves off the outside. And you'll have a belt full or you'll have a belt of excess 238 on that bottom side, as is shown on the top. And those are the outputs of all of these, and they're being placed back in on the inside again, right? And they take the place. They're prioritized over new ones coming in, just recycled. And then at some point, you'll occasionally get some excess 235s coming off the end of it. And the purpose of this one right here is to pull off the 235s, store them up, and if there's room on this belt, you want to feed it back into the process. You don't want to take any of these off prematurely, because you want your process running above all else. You want more of these. And I may nudge the process forward just a little bit, just in the interest of time. Looks like they're doing pretty well. There you go. I'm going to make sure while they're running they have at least 40 in each one. That way there will be excess. There we go. And we'll start to see some come off of the bottom there. Let's force the issue a little bit. There we go. So now as these fail to pick them up, right, they will come off the end here because they've already got some. See, this one is bypassing these. Now we're gonna, if we're not careful, we're gonna be inserter limited right here. And what one might do is that, so that you have two inserters inputting, because you don't ever want this belt to back up, because then the outputs will be blocked. And then we're just going to put them right back in. And we actually, same way here, we want the recycled ones to be prioritized over the new ones. New ones come from up here, and what we want to have happen is we want those to go on the belt first, right? So, but you probably won't have that happen, and this is a very rare occasion that those come in first. So there we go. And at some point, once you have maximum, once you have a lot of these 235s in this chest, we want some excess to go over here and start making fuel for us. So this blueprint will be available in the description. It's got some of these creative mod pieces in it, which I'll blank out. And like this guy is for iron. I've manufactured those in. I've gone ahead and labeled them with constant combinators, so you can see which ones go in where. You don't have to use my blueprint, but this gives you a concept of how to do it, and that you want your priorities are to feed everything back into the system to keep the process going, and then out of excess you pull some off. And again, I've used no logic in here other than those couple conditions. No combinators, no fancy math, no circuits, none of that business. Just two conditions. One, I'll show you. This one is, if I ever have any more than 100 in this chest over one stack, then feed it to the fuel. And then for fuel, we may want this one to be, we may want some bots to come pick it up. So I've added another condition right here, is have 100 in this chest at all times, and then the rest of them will go on to this. This is a fuel. This is a void, but we're going to assume the reactor consumes that one. So your reactor will start up if this fuel system goes out or runs out there. I've just added a couple beacons to speed this up, because this is really slow if you don't have it. Don't have it there. So I may juice this process just a little bit. There you go. And all these are running very consistently, and the excess is coming off. very consistently these inserters are keeping up. And at some point, we're going to see that excess. And then this inserter is going to bump over, and I'm going to add a little bit more. You'll see this kick on, and it'll feed the fuel system. When the stacker inserter can no longer keep up. Oh, there it goes. I was going to say any minute. I was going to fast forward the video. There you go. As soon as it went above 100, it's always you always want some in here. So this inserter is continually putting back on the belt. Yeah, you may want to have some excess of these going into making uranium fuel. Right. That's another way you could branch that. You could potentially branch this off and send that to the fuel. To make uranium fuel as well. That one will need some no productivity modules. That'll need speed modules. Rocket fuel plus uranium. And you only really need one of those uranium fuel cells and a rocket fuel. I'll spawn one in. And there you go. Boom. And then that'll go. Normally it's a 90-second crafting time, so I would recommend beacons there. But and each of those is 1.21 gigawatts. of power out of those uranium fuel cells, and those are great for trains, great for acceleration. So anyway, that's also what you could do out of the output of the excess of your process. All right, so that is the belt-fed Kovarex process, of a bot-fed process. And what I've done is I've started my initial primer unit, same way. I used to have steel chests out here. I've just manually thrown some of these 235s, 238s in here, the dark green. And I've noticed I've got a passive provider in here as the chest that's going to hold any excess of these. And it kind of needs to be a little bit farther away. And actually, I'm going to move this back a little bit. There we go. Because I want the bots to kind of struggle to get this, and I only want the excess to start going into all the rest of these. So notice the one thing I've done is I've put an active provider purple chest here on the output of the 238, because what we're more likely to have in this network is a scarcity of 235. So likely these products will all be empty, and we're going to have abundance of 238. But I don't want them to bunch up in the output of these machines. I kind of want to control that, so I've instead made an inventory of yellow chests here to house them. What one could do is go ahead and make an inventory of the 235s as well. Go ahead and put a passive provider or an active provider there, and just have your inventory sorted here. That's also a way to do it. But you got to know that you have to really pay close attention to your yellow chests, because the bots are always going to have try and find a home for that inventory, right? So you just need to know that you may end up getting a couple notices down here that say no inventory, no storage space available for 235, and the bot will call you over if these end up full. So I've gone ahead and spawned in some of these. So let's go ahead and see what this does. I'm going to go ahead and put the demand there, copy paste, and it is going to steal a little bit out of here. And see, there's the fear, is that you're going to steal too many out of this chest. See, look, if you can sneak in and get the bots to where they're not pulling any over, right? You gotta get them out of the hands of those inserters before the bots can get over there. That's why I moved that over just a little bit. So what should happen is, as this does its job, and there's a few excess 235s in here, the bots will then come get them and start spreading them over here. So let's go ahead and drop a few in here. Let's see, where are we at? 16. Let's go ahead and put in a stack of 30. So there you go. So they will slowly start to cleave off, and there's a reason why I put my primer unit way over here on the edge. So look, now they're going to push those, and they're going to pull them right into the product. They push them out of these purple chests right into the requester chests, right? So at some point, you'll end up with we end up with enough in here. This 133 will be satisfied, and as it pushes more out, you either want to add more to this process, or you want to add more. They'll start pushing them down here in a storage space. So, but essentially, with all that business with the belts, the bots really do handle pretty efficiently all of the overages and all of that. And handle the balances. What you need to be careful of is having too few of these run, or having the bots spread them all out and have to wait on more 235s to get them running. So probably what you want to wait for your first one is, do I have any excess into this chest? Once I have some excess here, then I can probably start my new one. That means, because that means this guy is satisfied, right? Your first one for 133. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 100 more, and we'll start to see that the bots, this will fill up, and we'll start to meet that quota, or meet that demand. We'll put in 100, and the bots are going to push all of those out. And at some point, we'll have 133 in there, and the bots will start to push them over here. Then we'll add the next one, the next one, the next one. And once this gets going, it's pretty efficient, and the bots will spread it out nicely. And then I'll show you. I'll go ahead and fast forward the video. I'll show you what a full process looks like, and then I'll show you how to cleave off the top, such that you're only taking the excess of what you have in here, right? Okay, so this is what a full bot process looks like. You can see they're all running, including the priming unit. The priming unit will eventually stop unless we replace it. You can go ahead and replace it once this is run down. You may even put a speaker or an alert or something once this priming unit runs out of these. It'll likely run out of these 238s first before it runs out of these 235s, unless the bots just steal them all, which could happen. But that's about it. So the bots will nicely keep these running the whole time. So now what we want to do is we only want to have the excess 235s pulled off into fuel, or we want to have it pulled off into the fuel cells, or the uranium, the uranium fuel cells, or the vehicle fuel. So here's my solution for that. What I've done is you hang it in the same robotic network. You don't have to pull any of these off. What you do is, so I have the requester chests that pull in the things like rocket fuel, everything except the 235. So this uranium fuel takes rocket fuel and the 235. So I have a requester chest only for the, oh, look at there, and it's one off. Okay, let's do that. Requester chest for only the rocket fuel demand. And I'll spawn some in so that's met. Dang it. And we'll just throw it in here. The other one is I have, I'll spawn in some iron so that the iron is met. For the fuel cells, we've got an abundance here of the 238s. So that's in for the fuel. So how do I get only the excess 235s off of this build? Well, the answer is a buffer chest. The buffer chest is a lower priority than the blue requester chests. So what that means is, within this network, it will fill every other requester chest before it fills this buffer chest. And that's how you keep it from pulling off. That's how you keep these full, and this one only using the excess. So as I put this in, I'm going to go ahead and put in the 100 that I need as a buffer chest, right? And then these guys will probably fight over it. But this will be a much lower priority than it'll be a lower priority than any of these, so that these machines will get this demand faster. There you go. Now they're all running. There you go. You need to keep fresh batch of 238s coming in all the time, so we can assume that maybe we'll just do something like this. Assume that your process comes in here of all of your 235s. This is a cool thing about creative mods. You can test all your builds and make sure they all work before you throw it into your main game where biters are trying to attack you. There you go. Just make sure we have some in the network at all times. Assume that's coming in from your miners. So at some point, if I look at this, this will begin to take shape a little bit more. We'll actually have an inventory of this 235, and as soon as we have one positive inventory, it's going to be pulled out by this one buffer chest, and that's how you deal with the excess. So there you go. At some point it'll do it. I don't know that it'll get here for a while unless I kind of juice this build quite a bit, because each of these has 100 or so that it needs in the intake. Let's just throw a couple of these in, and there we go. As soon as all this demand for the requester chest is met, then it'll drop over here and start pulling inventory off of the buffer. But as soon as it runs out over here, no more for this buffer chest. So it's only going to make what is in excess. And then you'll probably want to do something like this where you limit the chests so that you have some in your network at all times. Then you can do something clever like go to the edge and pull some off to another network. Right? See how at the border of one network to the other network. Right. Let's check this out. Where one of them is in one network and the other one's in the other network. So I've done that before. We separate out these networks. And for nuclear, it's probably a good idea to separate those out. That way all of this can happen in its own network, and you're not worried about something else stealing your inventory of 235 that you absolutely need to keep your process going. The good news about this also is that this is very scalable, right just as it is. And as soon as you have excess, it will just keep on going. And I'm going to go ahead and throw this up here. There you go. And there you have it. And as soon as these may quit, they may have the same problem where these quit running if you do that too fast, because what you don't want to do is have too much of that stolen. At some point, this is very bot intensive. I put 100 bots in here, and all of them are in the air. It is pretty bot intensive, so you may think about putting like say 500 bots in here just to make sure. They're a one-time charge if you never use them, but that's my recommendation. So. All right, that is the bot build for the Kovarex process. Very simple. All right, so that's the Kovarex process, both the belt build and the bot build that we use to just get the process going. You don't have to use beacons in it at all if you don't want to. It is a little power intensive, but it's kind of worth it. Maybe you start off without beacons and then place beacons around it once you have nuclear fuel up and going so that you can supply your power accordingly with nuclear fuel and get a big power jump that way. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. If you like this sort of thing, make sure you get that like and subscribe. Ring that bell so you get notified when I post a new video. If you have a question, leave it down in the comment section below. All the links for the blueprint and the mod that I used just to do the editor. I like Creative Mod better than the editor, so that link to that is in the description. If you want to come say hi to me live, you can go to twitch.tv/clowntown. You can come say hi. We're usually playing Factorio, doing a speed run, or something in that regard. Thank you very much for watching this video. See you next time.